Now we move on to the Kalb, and Tarana, I'm sorry, will again sing for us. The heart has its head in its own hands. Let's take a moment to absorb that, the beauty of that song and the evocation of the heart, the life of the heart. So this fifth station of the Suffolk world is the world of manifestation, the Nasut, the plane of Nasut. And this is the plane where the emphasis is working with the heart, developing the heart. That's why we do the zikr. We pierce the shell of the heart. We open the heart. We take the risk of exposing our sensitive heart to the roughness of life, but we find there uh, all possible strength in the heart, even though it is vulnerable, tender, sensitive, yet it has the ultimate strength. And God says, you can't find me anywhere in the universe but in the human heart. There you can find me. So let's now have the picture for this picture of Murshid, for this station. So this is the station in which um, the meaningfulness of life, the purpose of life, the purpose of being here to serve the divine cause is awakened. And this picture conveys that, the picture of Murshid conveys that feeling of dedication, of service, of perseverance, of high ideal, holding the ideal high. So the first reading is from the Gayan. You are love. You come from love. You are made by love. You cannot cease to love. You are love. You come from love. You're made by love. And you cannot ever cease to love. And the next reading is from the Confessions of Murshid about his experience with the honor that he received in traveling around India uh, on the mission of uh, upholding the classic tradition of music in India, which was then at that time beginning to fade. Uh, Popular music was becoming more prevalent, and interest in the classic music was fading. So at this time, Murshid traveled widely in India to the courts of many Maharajas and played and was well received in all these courts, and was honored for bringing the classic music, reviving the classic music, and given many medals. And this is the story that Murshid tells about the medals. To my amazement and horror, all the medals and decorations which I had gathered, excuse me, as emblems of, of my professional success, and which are the source of pride to me, gained as they were by so much endeavor, enthusiasm, and the labor of many years spent in constant wandering from place to place, were in a single instant snatched away from me forever. In a moment of abstraction, they were left in a car, which could not be traced despite all my efforts. But in place of the disappointment, which at first oppressed me, a revelation from God touched the hidden chords of my mind and opened my eyes to the truth. I said to myself, it matters not how much time you have spent to gain that which never belonged to you, but which you called your own. Today you understand it is no longer yours. And it is the same with all you possess in life, your property, friends, relations, even your own body and mind. All that you call my, not being your true property, will leave you. And only that which you name I, which is absolutely disconnected with all that is called my, will remain. Why not go forth and strive for that which is worth gaining in life? Why not thus attain to true glory instead of wasting your valuable opportunities in vain greed for wealth, fame, reputation, and those worldly honors which are here today and forgotten tomorrow? I knelt down and thanked God for the loss of my medals, crying, let all be lost from my imperfect vision, but thy true self, Ya Allah. And can we take this lesson from Murshid in regard to our own attachments and welcome the loss or the sacrifice of our attachments, hard as it may be, as a reminder of what is truly valuable in this life. And this next story, I think, is also from the Confessions, about a visit to the tomb of Muinuddin Chishti in Ajmer. At Ajmer, I visited the tomb of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, the most celebrated Sufi saint of India. The atmosphere of his last resting place was in itself a phenomenon. A sense of calm and peace pervaded it, and among all the throng of pilgrims, I yet felt as if I were the only one present. At nightfall, I went home and said Tahajjud, the midnight prayer. And lo, at the end of my prayers, there came to me a voice, as though in answer to my invocations. It was the voice of a fakir calling the people to prayer before sunrise. And he sang, awake, O man, from thy fast sleep. Thou knowest not that death watcheth thee every moment. Thou canst not imagine how great a load thou hast gathered to carry on thy shoulders, and how long the journey yet is for thee to accomplish. Up, up, the night is past, and the sun will soon arise. The unearthly quiet of the hour and the solemnity of the song move me to tears. Sitting on my rug with my rosary in my hand, I reflected that all the proficiency and reputation which I had achieved were utterly profitless in regard to my najat, or salvation. I recognized that the world was neither a stage set up for our amusement, nor a bazaar to satisfy our vanity and hunger, but a school wherein to learn a hard lesson. I then chose quite a different path to that which I had followed until then. In other words, I turned over a new page in my life. For this next story, I'm going to ask your indulgence. It's a very long story, so it's a lot of reading, but I think it's a very important story, and it has some uh, powerful lessons that I'll reflect on at the end. So this is the story of Murshid meeting with the Nizam of Hyderabad. Uh, some of you may know this story, but this is his telling of it in great detail. And he's telling it in the third person. From Bombay, Inayat went to Hyderabad, where he knew no one. Uh, and I should say that this is when Murshid was um, leaving his hometown and striking out on his own. So he felt, and this was at a very early age, early 20s, um, felt that he had to pursue his destiny, his career as a musician uh, outside of Baroda. He had to find some the court of a Maharaja where he could become established as a musician. So from Bombay, Inayat went to Hyderabad, where he knew no one. On his arrival there, he made some acquaintances to whom he made known the reason of his visiting Hyderabad, which was to render his music before His Highness Mir Mahbub Ali Khan, the Nizam of Hyderabad. So difficult was it for anyone to approach His Highness that every friend was astounded at such a request being made, and each one was certain he would be disappointed, that Murshid would be disappointed. To Inayat, however, there seemed no difficulty. The only thing that did surprise him was the pessimistic view. From that day on, he never spoke of his intention to anyone. 6 months passed by, during which time he practiced music and wrote a book on music in Hindustani called Minkari Musicar. By this time, he had made acquaintances who later became his great friends, and he was surrounded by the most loving of friends. A friend, Raja Deen Dayal, one day took Inayat for a drive to the Mount of Mullah, where the Nizam and his chief of staff were camping, celebrating some festival. The Raj happened to visit Lukman ul Dawla, the court physician. Lukman ul Dawa, the court physician, who was a Sufi, and who was engaged at that time in writing a commentary on the works of Rumi. At first sight, this court physician was impressed by Inayat and felt drawn to him, and he suggested, unasked, that it would be a good thing if this young musician could be introduced to the Maharaja. He immediately sent word to His Excellency Maharaja Kishan Prasad, who was also Prime Minister of the state and was camping nearby. On receiving the message, the Maharaja immediately sent for Inayat. So this Maharaja is the Prime Minister who's sending for Inayat. Madar-ul-Maham, the Prime Minister, was sitting greatly depressed. Those about him said he was not well. When Inayat saw him, he found that he was on the verge of collapse. The Maharaja felt that there was some hidden meaning in Inayat being sent to him. As they conversed, the countenance of the Maharaja began to change every moment, and a kind of joy beamed forth, which was a pleasant surprise to those around him. To see the Maharaja smile again, after so long, was a great relief and delight to them. Speaking of music, Inayat said, "Sarkar, there was a time when music in the land of India was held most sacred, and the great teachers of ancient times, such as Nardar and Tumbara, were great musicians. Although at the present time, music is so cast aside in India, still it is the same precious cordial. My work in music on the soil of India is to raise music to its pristine glory, that it may intoxicate those souls whose destiny it is to be exalted by the power of music." Among the Sufis of the Shishti order, music is still the source of elevation, by which means they attain to that ecstasy which culminates in the revelation of truth. That which made the greatest impression on the Maharaja was what Inayat said further. Sikar Ali, there are four intoxications. The intoxication that comes from physical power, the intoxication which wealth gives, the intoxication of rule, and the intoxication which comes from knowledge. But there is one intoxication superior to these aforementioned intoxications, which is that produced by music. The sincerity with which Inayat spoke and the effect of what he said, working not only upon himself but upon all who heard him, greatly raised him in their estimation. He felt that there was in Inayat's conversation something sacred hidden in the realm of art, and he felt greatly drawn to him. In the midst of that talk, which was taking place between the Maharaja and Inayat, word came from the Nizam that His Highness would visit the camp of the Maharaja that night. This was excellent news for the Maharaja, who had been for some time out of favor with the Nizam, and in his mind he at once associated Inayat's visit with the coming of his august master. He requested Inayat to stay on in his camp that evening, and Inayat most gladly accepted. A most joyful atmosphere was spread in the Maharaja's camp, each one saying to the other with great enthusiasm, "Huzur Bar Ahmad, Huzur Bar Ahmad, His Highness is coming." Every kind of preparation was made, and message after message came at intervals about each movement of the Nizam until the arrival. This created still greater enthusiasm in the camp, and one could feel the very atmosphere anticipating the royal visit. At last midnight passed, and now the people began to be uneasy, and upon the sun of hope the clouds of fear began to hover. Still the hope was there, and at about 2 o'clock in the morning, definite news came that His Highness had already left the camp and might be expected any moment. At last he appeared, amidst the sound of bugles and the beat of drums, dispersing the gloom which had fallen on the camp. The Nizam was seated on an elephant, while Arabs sang and sword danced around him, and the whole procession moved in the light of thousands of torches. The elephant walked gently, raising its head as though proudly conscious of his master's dignity. It was a picture that one's eyes could scarcely believe real, that time of early morning making it seem a vision. The elephant, covered with yellow plush trappings, arrived at the Maharaja's gate. There were also the mounted courtiers surrounding the elephant. Afsar ul Mulk, the most in favor aide-de-camp, leading the elephant. The Maharaja received and welcomed His Highness, who entered the room, followed by his courtiers, and the presentation of Nazar, the old custom of Hyderabad, began. The Maharaja then spoke of Inayat with great enthusiasm, which aroused the Nizam's interest, so that he at once expressed a desire to see him and hear him sing. When Inayat arrived in the Nizam's presence, the first meeting of glance created an understanding between them. The harmonious influence of Inayat was brought to bear on the Nizam, who continued to stand while permitting Inayat to sit for 3 hours, and he did not know whether he was sitting or standing, so absorbed was he in listening to Inayat sing, and to all that Inayat had to say. The Nizam was often moved by the high ideal of music Inayat had, and by the songs of devotion he sang, of symbolical philosophy. The Nizam, himself a poet and a musician, felt the call that came through Inayat in the realm of music. Inayat, at the same time, was impressed by the simplicity and kindness and by the unique understanding of human nature that the Nizam had. The Nizam sensed that the musical talent shown by Inayat was but an outer garb, covering some wonderful secret which he sought to fathom. He asked Inayat to tell him the secret of the magical effect of his music. Huzur, said Inayat, as sound is the highest source of manifestation, it is mysterious in itself, and whosoever has the knowledge of sound, he indeed knows the secret of the universe. My music is my thought, and my thought is my emotion. The deeper I dive into the ocean of feeling, the more beautiful are the pearls I bring forth in the form of melodies. Thus my music creates feeling within me, even before others feel it. My music is my religion. Therefore, worldly success can never be a fit price for it, and my sole object in music is to achieve perfection. A deep impression was made on the Nizam, which nothing among his royal environment could remove. All night it remained with him, and he could not rest for 6 hours till he sent for Inayat. He felt that a message had come to him in the realm of music, and he wished to receive that message in private, away from his courtiers, away from his usual environment, dressed in simple garments and sitting on the ground without either courtiers nor aide-de-camp in attendance. First, Inayat performed his music, and when he sang his own song, the meaning of which was that behind all this play of the universe, continually going on, there is one single power, perfect in its wisdom, which every moment is working through all. This moved the mystical soul of the Nizam to great ecstasy, and he heaved a deep sigh on hearing it. Then he asked if he might know Inayat's object in life, and whether there was any particular motive in his leaving his own country to come there. Inayat replied, Huzur, all outward motives which manifest through various people have behind them inward motives, and if one would think of all causation, one would find that there is one principal cause behind it all. And therefore it would not be wrong if I only said in answer to your question, I am sent here by God. What I have brought to you is not only music merely to entertain, but the appeal of harmony which unites souls in God. Some in the court of the Nizam wondered and asked if some mansu or service might not be given to Inayat. With unconcealed surprise, the Nizam said, Service to whom? To Inayat? As if to say, what are you saying? There seemed no apparent justification for that deep regard with which the Nizam treated young Inayat, except that inner recognition he had of him. After that, he always spoke of Inayat to his courtiers in, in terms of great esteem and appreciation. The Nizam named Inayat Tansen, after the eminent Tansen, one of the 9 jewels of the great Akbar's court, at the same time placing a magnificent emerald ring upon his finger. Inayat was further rewarded with a purse full of ashrafis, and from that time he had access to the Nizam's court. This incident made Inayat known throughout the whole of India, as the court of the Nizam was the foremost court in the land. The nobility, the Rajas and Nawabs of Hyderabad state then began to invite Inayat to come to their houses, but his loyalty to the Nizam did not allow him to accept any invitation, and so he sang to the Nizam solely. This interview of the Nizam gave Inayat such a heart-revealing idea of the act of God, something about which he could not talk to his friends during his stay in Hyderabad, and he spoke of it to no one but to God. Thus, to see his desire granted in a brief time without a single effort on his part could give belief in God to the greatest unbeliever. Pondering on this thought, he remembered a thought that he had given to the idea of meeting Nizam once when 9 years old. He was looking at a map of India at school, and when he saw Hyderabad on the map, asked about the place and about its ruler of his friend who was sitting next to him. And in one moment, he had a vision, after his speaking then to his friend, of being one day at the court of the Nizam. And in this interview, he saw that fulfilled exactly, which he had then seen for one moment at 9 years old. So now recall that Inayat, as a young man who had achieved recognition and status in his hometown of Baroda, where he was a professor of music in the school that his grandfather Mulabaksh set up, um, he felt at this early age of 19, 20, 21, that it was time to strike out and make his reputation in the world, to seek his destiny. And he had in mind to become a court musician in the court of the Nizam of Hyderabad, who was the greatest um, uh, supporter of musicians in India. His court was the supreme place to be for musicians in India, classic musicians. So it was rather presumptuous of this young man who had not before previously ventured out of Baroda, hadn't played in these various courts around India, to come to the Nizam of Hyderabad to his court, uh, and to feel confident that he could become a court musician there. And that's why his friends thought that this was unattainable, and tried to discourage him, and perhaps encouraged him to go to other courts first and establish his reputation there before he approached the Nizam. But Inayat was convinced that this was his destiny, that this was meant to be. So he stopped asking people, stopped asking his friends for help. And he retired to um, a place to live and spent 6 months with this, holding this concentration to uh, become a musician in the court of the Nizam. Can you imagine holding that concentration for 6 months, nothing happening, no response to his prayers, um, no indication that his prayers were ever going to deliver anything, and yet he confidently continued this concentration for 6 months. And then, through no effort of his own, he was invited out, and that invitation led to um, uh, becoming introduced to the prime minister. And as fortune would have it, the prime minister at that time was out of favor with the Nizam and looking for some opportunity to get back in his favor. And there is a custom in India, when a stranger comes to your door, when you're introduced to someone new, comes to your home, it may be a sign of luck. So one may look for the opportunity, for um, the promise of someone coming to visit, for a new acquaintance, a new visitor. And the fact that this new visitor was so adept at music, and the Nizam was a great connoisseur of music, gave the prime minister great hope that maybe this was the luck he was looking for, the change his relationship with the Nizam. So everything seemed somehow contrived to help Inayat achieve his desire, without any effort, as he said, without any effort on his part. Everything was in place. So, and then the Nizam came to visit, and immediately had some connection with Inayat through the exchange of glances. And then when Inayat began to play, he stood up, and he stood for 3 hours. Can you imagine? Standing for 3 hours. He was so absorbed in the music that he didn't think about whether he was tired or not, just was carried along by the music. And when the Nizam stood among all those who were gathered, his court surrounding him, everyone had to stand. So Inayat sat and played, and everyone stood for 3 hours. And at the end of this 3 hours, the Nizam declared Inayat the Tansen of India. So, Inayat's wish at the beginning was just to become a court musician in the court of the Nizam. But this fulfillment of his wish went much further than what his wish had initially been, to be declared the Tansen of India, a legendary musician, by the Nizam himself, was an unheard of honor, an amazing honor. And then the Nizam gave him his own ring, his emerald ring. So this was more than Inayat could ever have imagined wishing for, the fulfillment of his wish many times over. And yet, in that moment, he said, it meant nothing in comparison to what had been demonstrated to him, that God's wish, if you hold the concentration, God's wish will come true. His faith was greatly strengthened. There's a saying of Jesus that if your son asks for something, will you give him a rock instead? No, the Father won't give him a rock. The Father will give him what he wishes for. So this was the fulfillment of that teaching. And that was the great gift, not just the attainment of his wish, but the discovery, the deepening of his faith, that one's sincere wish is the divine wish, and it will be accomplished if one holds to it, stays with it. So the practice for this station is Yanur, the inner light. And we have a tendency to think of light as tangible light, the light that we experience, the light of the sun, the light of a candle, and so forth. But light has another dimension, which is intelligence, pure intelligence. So that inner light is not only a sensory experience of light, like a light piercing the darkness, the inner impression lighting up the darkness of closing one's eyes, but it's the impression of intelligence, uh, the intelligence that gives us the capacity to find meaning in life, and meaning in our experience, meaning in our life in the world. So when we say Yanur, we can think of this meaning that Inayat discovered in the affirmation of his faith. So let's say Yanur 11 times. Yanur, 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 Yanur. And in the Fikr Asir, just reflect on the meaning that's revealed to you in your life. The capacity of divine intelligence, which is a gift given to you to perceive that meaning.